Hello, everyone. And this horrible abomination of a mess was once my pride and joy. We moved to the house that we live in now in the fall of 2010. So, in the spring of 2011, I set this thing up. And then it was my pride and joy, my number one priority as far as fish keeping hobbies and plants and stuff go, up until the winter of 14-15 when it had a catastrophic problem. And tried to get it going a couple other times, and this is what it looked like back in its heyday. This is 2013. Water lilies and the flowering plants are impatiens. Remember when I had impatiens in my inside guppy pond? For those of you who watch the channel, this is where I figured that out. And this little girl right here is my youngest. She is now almost 15 years old.
Wow, they're hungry there.
She's just a little girl. This was always me and her. This was our thing because the others were all older, quite a bit older, and already off to school. And so me and her spent a lot of time at the pond when she was real little. And I even kept it heated during the winter. So if I could keep the water temperature at 50 degrees, I could feed the goldfish wheat germ. And right here is the last summer of its peak, 14, because that winter of 14-15, I had a busted pipe. I was leaving for work, and there was water spraying 20 feet in the air, and the pond was empty, and that was that for the fish. But the plants have always came back year after year, so it's set untouched, no pump running since the winter of 14-15. I think I tried to get it going a little bit the summer of 15, but I was working outside and out of town a lot, and so this is what happened since 15. So let the work begin. Oh my gosh, this was such a mess. It was pretty much just a cesspit of muck and the leaves had blown in over the last however many years. Let's see, it's 13, and the last time it was really up and running was the end of 14. So yeah, it's been sitting for a long time, but sure enough, I plugged that pump in and it started pumping water. So the pump's still good. The problem was the hose busted. You can see right there. The hose busted where it come up out of the pond when it was 7 degrees, and water was still spraying out, but the pond was almost completely empty when I was leaving for work at 7 in the morning, and it was like 7 degrees. So we're just going through here. I'm trying to pump the water out, but of course the pump it's got a really big, huge leaf guard on it, but it's all clogged up, and there's not really, it's like half water, half leaves, just muck stuff. Tearing down most of the waterfall, spraying off some of the mud and gunk, getting it cleaned off enough so I can crawl down in there and get the bottom of it. There's actually this top shelf here. Now, here we are. Take a look at the disaster after that time lapse. Look at the mess we got here. Actually aggravated my tendonitis pulling out those mini cattails, the big tall dead stuff. Well, they are not dead. They come back every year. And over the course of the years of just sitting, the dogs have knocked all the bricks into the pond. Look at all these plants I pulled out of here. Some of these clumps are like, that's like over 100 pounds right there of mini cattails. Pretty outrageous. So here I am climbing down in it, and this was gross. This was disgusting. You can see the consistency of that is just like mud and muck. The very last like 4 or 5 inches of stuff that was in there. So I brought out the handy dandy shop vac that I use all the time. Actually, my shop vac, the reason I got this shop vac was to use on my pond all those years ago, and it's still the same shop vac I use in my tanks now. So hosing it all down, pump the muddy water out, and then we're filling it back up. Making sure everything's good. scooping out some of the stuff I may have missed. And yeah, so my hobby used to always be about ponds. It used to always be about ponds. It was my number one priority. I had ponds at my old house. As soon as we first chance I got when we moved to the new house, I built a pond. I've been doing ponds since my early mid 20s to whatever 8 years ago was. So I'm really pretty super excited about getting this thing going again. And here we are. You can see I went ahead, filled it all the way up, and pumped all the water out. Look at that pump go without any restriction on it. That thing is still a monster. This is like a 3,000 or some gallon per hour pump. I paid like $400 for 12 years ago. And it still runs like a champ even after sitting in the bottom. I'm all dirty. Time to call at the end of the day. I got dad stuff to do. Alright, so this is a recap of what we accomplished on day one. We got the hard part done. We got it all cleaned out. I picked out some of the marginal plants I wanted to keep. And as I was starting to talk about a little bit earlier, this is the top plant shelf. Then there's another shelf. And then there's the deep section. So there's a marginal plant shelf, and then there's a shelf for lilies, and then there's a deep section. And those are all the rest of the plants I threw in the filter. And look at the mess I've got here to deal with. But we've got the main part of it done, the worst of it anyways. And here we are, the start of day two. I had to I actually went to Lowe's because I have pond stuff. I got new pond tubing and I'm ready to go. I actually ended up getting all of this going. Again, I spent less than $100 and that was most of it for the pond tubing, a heavy duty extension cord for outside use to run the pump, and a bunch of rocks that you'll see here coming up. So we got the stream liner, waterfall liner coming up, scooping out the rocks and muck and gunk that was in there. Carefully trying to get all that out without damaging the liner. You can see ripping out the old stuff from the old filter setup that was in that stock tank filter. I'm transferring all the plants I left in there soaking overnight. And I'm trying to suck out the water, and I just got a mouthful of water there. That was really gross. But I'm siphoning out the water that was in the stock tank so I can dump it out. I already shoved out all the gravel that was in there yesterday, the day before. And now I'm off camera. This part of it, well, okay, here I am. Okay, yep. Taking up the rest of the liner. I mean, some of this I don't get on camera real good because I'm covered in muck and I only have the one camera. And I'm doing the best I can. Look at the birds. The birds have already come back. There's birds back out there all the time. Wildlife has returned. All right, so let's start preparing to redo this from the ground up again. We got an empty stock tank. One of the things I did off camera there was, instead of having that pipe sticking out for a spout, I cut a spillway into the stock tank with my Dremel tool. So now what I'm doing here, I'm sitting here thinking, well, how do I want to do this? How do I need to do this? Because you got to remember, a lot of this stuff hadn't seen the light of day. This filter I set up in like 13 or 14, I believe. I think it was 14 I set this filter up. So this stuff hadn't seen the light of day for almost 10 years. So there's parts of there when I uncovered it up, I didn't remember how I did it or why I did it that way. It's been so long ago. So overall, I'm pretty proud of myself. It did, other than that hose busting, there's a connection. On this time, I bought new hose and used one continuous piece with no joints or couplers or anything like that. And then there's also restrictions because I was running it through filters, and so there's a lot of pressure. Now all I'm doing is using that great big powerful pump to pump water up through the rocks in the stock tank. So I remember setting this up. It took a lot of tries to get it right because having these streams and waterfall things leak, is really tricky, especially if you're trying to do two different liners. You're definitely better off to have one piece of liner and just have it all encapsulated in one liner. But I'd cut this liner up into pieces, and apparently I didn't have one big enough, so I had to make two pieces work. And so I did the best I could. I think I ended up having pretty good success so far after it's ran so far now. It seems like the waterfall's not leaking. And I have a lot more water going through this than I ever did before. Get more cement blocks. Before I just used all those little square blocks, and I get asked the question, why do you have all those little blocks in all your tanks? Well, because I need something to hold the filter in place, and I had literally hundreds of these in my backyard, and I always just went out back and stole them. That's how I ended up with all those little blocks in my tanks. And I already had these cement blocks as well on the other side of the house. And so now I'm just trying to figure out how to get it all lined up, trying to get the liner, because there's a liner under the stock tank, and there's the actual liner underneath the waterfall stream part, and then there's a flap of liner from the pond coming up underneath that. So you got to try to get it all situated and the elevation's correct so that water doesn't leak out. All right, so here's the brand new 1.5-inch corrugated pond tubing I found at Lowe's. And so we're going to get that. I'm hooking it up off camera. Then we're going to lower the pump. I think we got it all hooked up. I'm still trying to get it hooked up. Even the stainless steel clamp that was on the pump was still good. Now we lowered it down in there. And so what I've done, I've got a cement block down in there. I'm probably off fetching that now. Yep, there it is. And I'm wrapping around this extra tubing around the cement block. That'll keep it in there and act as an anchor. So, because there's a lot of water coming out of there, and it'll all just flop around like a fire hose if I don't do something about it. And let's get the pump plugged in for the very first time just to see what happens. Make sure nothing catastrophic is going to happen. And there we go. We got water. I'm sitting here watching it, making sure, and there it is. We got pretty good flow coming out of there. That is more flow than ever come out of there before. That's for sure. But I want to try to make some kind of a waterfall feature here. And so we got to try to find a flat surface that's going to cascade the water. And I'm playing around with how I'm going to run the hose and all that. So we're going to figure out a way. I'm probably off fetching another cement block, I would guess. All right, so we're going to do, now let's try that now. Let's try that. And then I have an idea. We got one of those. And it is off center because of the circulation in the pump. But I think that is something I can work with. Let's see what I can come up with that kind of cascading flow. And unfortunately, I forgot to hit the record button on my time-lapse thing. But this is what we ended up with. The water is all dirty because in that filter there are 150 pounds of river rock and 200 pounds of pea gravel that I had to rinse, and apparently I didn't rinse it good enough, so that's why the water's cloudy. Just like if you use gravel or sand in the tank and didn't get it rinsed off good enough and you get it cloudy, well, my filter is the rocks. And when the plants grow up in there, they'll take care of all the nutrients. So the water is pretty cloudy, but it'll be clear in a couple days. And by this point, I still have to pretty up the bricks, and there you go. I got the perimeter around the pond done. You can see it from this angle. Let me tell you, this is a lot of bricks and a lot of rocks. And man, I tell you what, I am sore. I used to do hard physical work, and now I've been doing my fish tanks and shrimp and stuff for almost a year now, full time. And I gotta work hard. Oh my gosh, my old body pays for it. But it'll be interesting to see in this cut. I'm gonna try putting moss and stuff on there and see how that looks. And I covered up right here, I covered up the tubing coming up, protect it from weed eaters and dogs and critters and stuff like that. I figured the least that is exposed, the better. So I think it's looking pretty good, man. This was a ton of work. This took so much time and effort. I put more work and blood, sweat, and tears into this than any of my other projects. Oh my God, 2 full saw days, and Bailey approves. Oh goodness, I'm wore out. I'm sore. And here we are at day 3. The water's starting to clear. You can see the water lilies. There's a water lily there on that shelf. There's a water lily down there on another shelf. So I'm really super excited about getting this thing going again. I plan to use it to grow out guppies in the summer. So there's still a lot of pruning up to do, but I'll show my progress as I go. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.